Cat Stevens.
Yusuf Islam, commonly known by his former stage name Cat Stevens, is a British singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, humanitarian and education philanthropist. He is a prominent convert to Islam. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2014. Stevens' albums Tea for the Tillerman, 1970, and Teaser and the Fira Cat, 1971, were both certified triple platinum in the US by the RIAA. His 1972 album Catch Bullet 4 sold 500,000 copies in the first 2 weeks of release alone and was Billboard's #1 LP for 3 consecutive weeks. He also earned 2 ASCAP Songwriting Awards in consecutive years for The First Cut Is the Deepest. The song has been a hit single for 4 different artists. Some of his other hit songs include Further and Son, Wild World, Peace Train, Moon Shadow, and Morning Has Broken. In December 1977, Stevens converted to Islam and adopted the name Yusuf Islam the following year. In 1979, he auctioned all his guitars for charity and left his music career to devote himself to educational and philanthropic causes in the Muslim community. He has received several awards for his work in promoting peace in the world, including the 2003 World Award, the 2004 Man for Peace Award, and the 2007 Mediterranean Prize for Peace. Known professionally by the single name Yusuf, in 2006 he returned to pop music with his first album of new pop songs in 28 years, entitled Another Cup. On May 5, 2009, he released the album Road Singer.
Early life 1948 to 1965.
Stephen Georgi, born in the Marylebone area of London, was the third child of a Greek Cypriot father, Stavros Georgi, b. 1900, and a Swedish mother, Ingrid Wickman, b. 1915. Stephen had an older sister, Anita, and a brother, David. The family lived above the Moulin Rouge, a restaurant that his parents operated on the north end of Shaftesbury Avenue, which was a short walk from Piccadilly Circus in the Soho Theatre district of London. All family members worked in the restaurant. His parents divorced when he was about 8 years old, but they continued to maintain the family restaurant and live above it. Although his father was Greek Orthodox and his mother a Swedish Baptist, Georgi was sent to St. Joseph Roman Catholic Primary School in Maclean Street, which was closer to his father's business on Drury Lane. Georgi developed an interest in piano at a fairly young age, eventually using the family baby grand piano to work out the chords, since no one else there played well enough to teach him. Inspired by the popularity of the Beatles, at age 15 he extended his interest to the guitar, persuaded his father to pay PS8 for his first instrument, and began playing it and writing songs. He would escape at times from his family responsibilities to the rooftop above their home, and listen to the tunes of the musicals drifting from just around the corner from Denmark Street, which was then the centre of the British music industry. Later, Stevens has emphasized that the advent of West Side Story in particular affected him, giving him a different view of life. With interests in both art and music, he and his mother moved to Gävle, Sweden, where he attended primary school, Solangskolan, and started developing his drawing skills after being influenced by his uncle Hugo Wickman, a painter. They subsequently returned to England. He attended other local West End schools, where he says he was constantly in trouble, and did poorly in everything but art. He was called the artist boy, and mentions that I was beat up, but I was noticed. He went on to take a 1-year course of study at Hammersmith School of Art, as he considered a career as a cartoonist. Though he enjoyed art, his later record albums would feature his original artwork on his album covers. He wanted to establish a musical career and began to perform originally under the stage name Steve Adams in 1965 while at Hammersmith. At that point, his goal was to become a songwriter. As well as the Beatles, other musicians who influenced him were the Kings, Bob Dylan, Nina Simone, blues artists Lead Belly and Muddy Waters, Biff Rose, who played on his first album, Leo Kottke, and Paul Simon. He also wanted to emulate composers who wrote musicals, like Ira Gershwin and Leonard Bernstein. In 1965 he signed a publishing deal with Ardmore and Beechwood and recorded several demos, including The First Cut is the Deepest.
Musical career 1966 to 1970. Early musical career.
Georgi began to perform his songs in London coffee houses and pubs. At first he tried forming a band, but soon realised he preferred performing solo. Thinking that his given name might not be memorable to prospective fans, he chose a stage name Cat Stevens, in part because a girlfriend said he had eyes like a cat, but mainly because he said, "I couldn't imagine anyone going to the record store and asking for that Stephen Demeter Georgi album." And in England, and I was sure in America, they loved Animals. In 1966, at age 18, he impressed manager-producer Mike Hurst, formerly of British vocal group The Springfields, with his songs, and Hurst arranged for him to record a demo and then helped him get a record deal. The first singles were hits. I Love My Dog charted at number 28, and Matthew and Son, the title song from his debut album, went to number 2. I'm Gonna Get Me a Gun reached Britain's top 10, and the album Matthew and Son itself began charting. The original version of the Tremeloes cover hit, Here Comes My Baby, was written and recorded by Stevens. Over the next 2 years, Stevens recorded and toured with an eclectic group of artists ranging from Jimi Hendrix to Ian Gilbert Humperdinck. Stevens was considered a fresh-faced teen star, placing several single releases in the British pop music charts. Some of that success was attributed to the pirate radio station Wonderful Radio London, which gained him fans by playing his records. In August 1967, he went on the air with other recording artists who had benefited from the station to mourn its closure. His December 1967 album New Masters failed to chart in the United Kingdom. The album is now most notable for his song The First Cut is the Deepest, a song he sold for PS30 to P.P. Arnold that was to become a massive hit for her, and an international hit for Keith Hampshire, Rod Stewart, James Morrison, and Sheryl Crow. 40 years after he recorded the first demo of the song, it earned him 2 back-to-back ASCAP Songwriter of the Year awards, in 2005 and 2006.
Tuberculosis.
Stevens contracted tuberculosis in 1969 and was close to death at the time of his admittance to the King Edward VII Hospital, Midhurst, West Sussex. He spent months recuperating in the hospital and a year of convalescence. During this time Stevens began to question aspects of his life, and spirituality. He later said, "To go from the show business environment and find you are in hospital, getting injections day in and day out, and people around you are dying, it certainly changes your perspective. I got down to thinking about myself. It seemed almost as if I had my eyes shut." He took up meditation, yoga, and metaphysics. Read about other religions. And became a vegetarian. As a result of his serious illness and long convalescence, and as a part of his spiritual awakening and questioning, he wrote as many as 40 songs, many of which would appear on his albums in years to come.
Changes in musical sound after illness.
The lack of success of Stevens' second album mirrored a difference of personal tastes in musical direction, and a growing resentment at producer Mike Hurst's attempts to recreate another album like that of his debut, with heavy-handed orchestration, and overproduction, rather than the folk rock sound Stevens was attempting to produce. He admits having purposefully sabotaged his own contract with Hurst, making outlandishly expensive orchestral demands and threatening legal action, which resulted in his goal, release from his contract with Durham Records, a sub-label of major Decca Records. Upon regaining his health at home after his release from the hospital, Stevens recorded some of his newly written songs on his tape recorder, and played his changing sound for a few new record executives. After hiring agent Barry Crost, who had arranged for an audition with Chris Blackwell of Island Records, Blackwell offered him a chance to record whenever and with whomever he liked, and more importantly to cat, however he liked. With Crost's recommendation, Stevens signed with Paul Samwell Smith, previously the bassist of the Yardbirds, to be his new producer.
Musical career 1970 to 1978. Height of popularity.
Healthy and sporting a new beard, Stevens was armed with a catalogue of new songs that reflected his new perspective on what he wanted to bring to the world with his music. His previous work has sold at home in the UK, but Stevens was still relatively unknown by the public across the Atlantic. To rectify this, after signing with Island Records in 1970, an American distribution deal was arranged with A&M Records' Jerry Moss in North America. Stevens began work on Mona Bone Jakin, a folk rock-based album. Producer Paul Samuel Smith paired Stevens with guitarist Alun Davies, who was at that time working as a session musician. Davies was the more experienced veteran of two albums which already had begun to explore the emerging genres of skiffle and folk rock music. Davies was also thought a perfect fit with Stevens in particular for his fingerwork on the guitar, harmonizing and his backing vocals. They originally met just to record Mona Bone Jakin, but developed a fast friendship. Davies, like Stevens, was a perfectionist, appearing at all sound checks to be sure that all the equipment and sound were prepared for each concert. He collaborated with Stevens on all but two of the succeeding albums Stevens released, and performed and recorded with him until Stevens' retirement. Their friendship continued, however, and when Stevens re-emerged as Yusuf Islam after 27 years, Davies appeared again performing at his side, and has remained there. The first single released from Mona Bone Jakin was Lady D'Urbanville, which Stevens wrote about his young American girlfriend Patty D'Urbanville. The record, with a madrigal sound unlike most music played on pop radio, with sounds of djembes and bass in addition to Stevens and Davies guitars, reached number 8 in the UK. It was the first of his hits to get real airplay in the United States. It sold over 1 million copies, and was awarded a gold record in 1971. Other songs written for D'Urbanville included Maybe You're Right, and Just Another Night. In addition, the song Pop Star, about his experience as a teen star, and Kathmandu, featuring Genesis frontman Peter Gabriel playing flute, were featured. Mona Bone Jakin was an early example of the solo singer-songwriter album format that was becoming popular for other artists as well. Rolling Stone magazine compared its popularity with that of Elton John's Tumbleweed Connection, saying it was played across the board, across radio formats. Mona Bone Jakin was the precursor for Stevens' international breakthrough album, Tea for the Tillerman, which became a top 10 Billboard's hit. Within 6 months of its release, it had sold over 500,000 copies, attaining gold record status in the United Kingdom and the United States. The combination of Stevens' new folk rock style and accessible lyrics which spoke of everyday situations and problems, mixed with the beginning of spiritual questions about life, would remain in his music from then on. The album features the top 20 single Wild World, a parting song after D'Urbanville moved on. Wild World has been credited as the song that gave Tea for the Tillerman enough kick to get it played on FM radio. And the head of Island Records, Chris Blackwell, was quoted as calling it the best album we've ever released. Other album tracks include Hard-Headed Woman, and Father and Son, a song sung both in baritone and tenor, about the struggle between fathers and their sons who are faced with their own personal choices in life. In 2001, this album was certified by the RIAA as a multi-platinum record, having sold 3 million copies in the United States at that time. It is ranked at number 206 in Rolling Stone magazine's 2003 list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. After the end of his relationship with D'Urbanville, Stevens noted the effect it had on writing his music, saying, "Everything I wrote while I was away was in a transitional period and reflects that. Like Patty. A year ago we split. I had been with her for 2 years. What I write about Patty and my family. When I sing the songs now, I learn strange things. I learn the meanings of my songs late." Having established a signature sound, Stevens enjoyed a string of successes over the following years. 1971's Teaser and the Firecat album reached number 2 and achieved gold record status within 3 weeks of its release in the United States. It yielded several hits, including Peace Train, Morning Has Broken, and Moon Shadow. This album was also certified by the RIAA as a multi-platinum record in 2001, with over 3 million US sales through that time. When interviewed on a Boston radio station, Stevens said about Teaser and the Fear Cat. For 7 months from 1971 to 1972, Stevens was romantically linked to popular singer Carly Simon while both were produced by Samuel Smith. During that time both wrote songs for and about one another. Simon wrote and recorded at least 2 top 50 songs, Legend in Your Own Time, and Anticipation about Stevens. He reciprocated in his song to her, after their romance, entitled, Sweet Scarlet. His next album, Catch Bullet 4, released in 1972, was his most rapidly successful album in the United States, reaching gold record status in 15 days, and holding the #1 position on the Billboard charts for 3 weeks. This album continued the introspective and spiritual lyrics that he was known for, combined with a rougher-edged voice and a less acoustic sound than his previous records, using synthesizers and other instruments. Although the sales of the album indicated Stevens' popularity, the album did not produce any real hits, with the exception of the single Sitting, which charted at number 16. Catch Bullet 4 was platinum certified in 2001.
Movie soundtracks.
In July 1970, Stevens recorded one of his songs, But I Might Die Tonight, for the Jerzy Skolimowski film Deep End. In 1971, Stevens provided 9 songs to the soundtrack of the black comedy Harold and Maude, which became a popular cult movie celebrating the free spirit, and brought Stevens' music to a wider audience, continuing to do so long after he stopped recording in the late 1970s. Among the songs were, Where Do the Children Play? Trouble, and I Think I See the Light. 2 of the songs, Don't Be Shy, and If You Want to Sing Out, were not released on any album until their inclusion in 1984 on a second Greatest Hits collection, Footsteps in the Dark, Greatest Hits, Volume 2. After his religious conversion in the late 1970s, Stevens stopped granting permission for his songs to be used in films. However, almost 20 years later, in 1997, the movie Rushmore received his permission to use his songs Here Comes My Baby, and The Wind, showing a new willingness on his part to release his music from his Western pop star days. This was followed in 2000 by the inclusion of Peace Train in the movie Remember the Titans, in 2000 by the use in Almost Famous of the song The Wind, and in 2006 the inclusion of Peace Train on the soundtrack to We Are Marshall. Since then, permission has been given for Cat Stevens songs to be used in the soundtracks for several movies and TV shows, including the song Tea for the Tillerman used as the theme tune for the Ricky Gervais BBC HBO sitcom Extras. A Christmas season television commercial for gift-giving by the diamond industry aired in 2006 with Cat Power's cover of How Can I Tell You?
Later recordings.
Subsequent releases in the 1970s also did well on the charts and in ongoing sales, although they did not touch the success he had from 1970 to 1973. In 1973, Stevens moved to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, as a tax exile from the United Kingdom. However, he later donated the money to UNESCO. During that time he created the album Foreigner, which was a departure from the music that had brought him to the height of his fame. It was differed in several respects, entirely written by Stevens. He dropped his band and produced the record without the assistance of Samuel Smith, who had played a large role in catapulting him to fame, and instead of guitar, he played keyboard instruments throughout the album. It was intended to show a funk soul element rising in popularity that Stevens had come to appreciate. One side of Foreigner was continuous, much different from the radio-friendly pop tunes fans had come to expect. In November 1973 he performed side 2 of the album at the Aquarius Theatre in Hollywood, with a pre-arranged uninterrupted quadraphonic simulcast on the ABC network. The show was titled The Moon and Star Concert. This performance did include his band, but they were all but overshadowed by an orchestra. The album produced a couple of singles including The Hurt, but did not reach the heights he had once enjoyed. The follow-up to Foreigner was Buddha and the Chocolate Box, largely a return to the instrumentation and styles employed in Teaser and the Fira Cat and Tea for the Tillerman. Featuring the return of Alun Davis and best known for Oh Very Young, Buddha and the Chocolate Box reached platinum status in 2001. Stevens' next album was the concept album Numbers, a less successful departure for him. In April 1977, his Izetso album updated his pop rock and folk rock style with the extensive use of synthesizers, giving it a more synth-pop style. Was Dogodonut in particular was an early techno-pop fusion track and a precursor to the 1980s electro-music genre, making early use of a music sequencer. Izetso included his last chart hit, Remember the Days of the Old Schoolyard, an early synth-pop song that used a polyphonic synthesizer. It was a duet with fellow UK singer Elkie Brooks. Linda Lewis appears in the song's video, with Cat Stevens singing to her, as they portray former schoolmates, singing to each other on a schoolyard merry-go-round. This is one of the few music videos that Stevens made, other than simple videos of concert performances. His final original album under the name Cat Stevens was Back to Earth, released in late 1978, which was also the first album produced by Samuel Smith since his peak in single album sales in the early 1970s. Several compilation albums were released before and after he stopped recording. After Stevens left Decca Records, they bundled his first two albums together as a set, hoping to ride the commercial tide of his early success. Later his newer labels did the same, and he himself released compilations. The most successful of the compilation albums was the 1975 Greatest Hits, which has sold over 4 million copies in the United States. In May 2003 he received his first Platinum Europe Award from the IFPI for Remember Cat Stevens, the Ultimate Collection, indicating over 1 million European sales.
Religious conversion.
While on holiday in Marrakech, Morocco, Stevens was intrigued by the sound of the adhan, the Islamic ritual call to prayer, which was explained to him as music for God. Stevens said, "I thought, music for God? I'd never heard that before. I'd heard of music for money, music for fame, music for personal power, but music for God." In 1976 Stevens nearly drowned off the coast of Malibu, California, USA, and said he shouted, "Oh God! If you save me I will work for you." He related that right afterward a wave appeared and carried him back to shore. This brush with death intensified his long-held quest for spiritual truth. He had looked into Buddhism, Zen, I Ching, numerology, tarot cards and astrology. Stevens' brother David Gordon brought him a copy of the Quran as a birthday gift from a trip to Jerusalem. Stevens took to it right away, and began his transition to Islam. During the time he was studying the Quran, Stevens began to identify more and more with the name of Joseph, a man bought and sold in the marketplace, which is how he said he had increasingly felt within the music business. Regarding his conversion, in his 2006 interview with Alan Yentob, he stated, "To some people, it may have seemed like an enormous jump, but for me, it was a gradual move to this." And, in a Rolling Stone magazine interview, he reaffirmed this, saying, "I had found the spiritual home I'd been seeking for most of my life. And if you listen to my music and lyrics, like Peace Train, and On the Road to Find Out, it clearly shows my yearning for direction and the spiritual path I was traveling." Stevens formally converted to the Islamic religion on December 23, 1977, taking the name Yusuf Islam in 1978. Yusuf is the Arabic rendition of the name Joseph. He stated that he always loved the name Joseph, and was particularly drawn to the story of Joseph in the Quran. Although he discontinued his pop career, he was persuaded to perform one last time before what would become his 25-year musical hiatus. Appearing with his hair freshly shorn and an untrimmed beard, he headlined a charity concert on November 22, 1979 in Wembley Stadium to benefit UNICEF's International Year of the Child. The concert closed with a performance by Stevens, David Essex, Alun Davis, and Stevens' brother, David, who wrote the song that was the finale, Child for a Day. Yusuf married Fawzia Mubarak Ali on September 7, 1979, at Regent's Park Mosque in London. They have 5 children and 3 grandchildren and currently live in London, spending part of each year in Dubai.
Life as Yusuf Islam 1978–present. Muslim faith and musical career.
Following his conversion, Yusuf abandoned his music career. When he became a Muslim in 1977, he said, the imam at the mosque was told that he was a pop star, and he told Yusuf that it was fine to continue as a musician, so long as the songs were morally acceptable. But Yusuf says he knew there were aspects of the music business, such as vanity and temptations, that did go against the teachings of the Quran, and this was the primary reason he gave for retreating from the spotlight. But in his first performance on the television show Later, with Jules Holland, 27 years after leaving the music business, and in other interviews, he gave different reasons for leaving. A lot of people would have loved me to keep singing, he said. You come to a point where you have sung, more or less, your whole repertoire and you want to get down to the job of living. You know, up until that point, I hadn't had a life. I'd been searching, been on the road. Estimating in January 2007 that he continues to earn approximately $1.5 million a year from his Cat Stevens music, he decides to use his accumulated wealth and ongoing earnings from his music career on philanthropic and educational causes in the Muslim community of London and elsewhere. In 1981, he founded the Islamia Primary School in Salisbury Road in the North London area of Kilburn and, soon after, founded several Muslim secondary schools. In 1992, Yusuf set up the Association of Muslim Schools, AMS UK, a charity that brought together all the Muslim schools in the UK. He is also the founder and chairman of the Small Kindness charity, which initially assisted famine victims in Africa and now supports thousands of orphans and families in the Balkans, Indonesia, and Iraq. He served as chairman of the charity Muslim Aid from 1985 to 1993.
Salman Rushdie controversy.
Yusuf attracted controversy in 1989, during an address to students at London's Kingston University, where he was asked about the fatwa calling for the death of Salman Rushdie, author of the Satanic Verses. The media interpreted his response as support for the fatwa. He released a statement the following day denying that he supported vigilantism, and claiming that he had merely recounted the legal Islamic punishment for blasphemy. In a BBC interview, he displayed a newspaper clipping from that period, with quotes from his statement. Subsequent comments made by him in 1989 on a British television programme were also seen as being in support of the fatwa. In a statement in the FAQ section of one of his websites, Yusuf asserted that while he regretted the comments, he was joking and that the show was improperly edited. In the years since these comments, he has repeatedly denied ever calling for the death of Rushdie or supporting the fatwa.
September 11, 2001 attacks.
Immediately following the September 11 attacks on the United States, he said. He appeared on videotape on a VH1 pre-show for the October 2001 concert for New York City, condemning the attacks and singing his song Peace Train for the first time in public in more than 20 years, as an a cappella version. He also donated a portion of his box set royalties to the Fund for Victims' Families, and the rest to orphans in underdeveloped countries. During the same year, Yusuf Islam dedicated time and effort in joining the Forum Against Islamophobia and Racism, an organization that worked towards battling misperceptions and acts against others because of their religious beliefs or their racial identity, or both, after many Muslims reported a backlash against them due in part to the grief caused by the events in the United States on September 11.
Denial of entry into the United States.
On September 21, 2004, Yusuf was on a United Airlines flight from London to Washington, traveling to a meeting with U.S. entertainer Dolly Parton, who had recorded Peace Train several years earlier and was planning to include another Cat Stevens song on an upcoming album. While the plane was in flight, his name was flagged as being on a no-fly list. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, officers alerted the United States Transportation Security Administration, which then diverted his flight to Bangor, Maine, where he was detained by officers from the Department of Homeland Security. The following day, Yusuf was denied entry and flown back to the United Kingdom. A spokesman for Homeland Security claimed there were concerns of ties he may have to potential terrorist-related activities. The Israeli government had deported Yusuf in 2000 over allegations that he provided funding to the Palestinian organization Hamas, but he denied doing so knowingly. Yusuf, who repeatedly has condemned terrorism and Islamic extremism, stated, "I have never knowingly supported or given money to Hamas. At the time I was reported to have done it, I didn't know such a group existed. Some people give a political interpretation to charity. We were horrified at how people were suffering in the Holy Land." However, the United States Department of Homeland Security, DHS, added him to a watch list. The U.S. removal provoked an international controversy and led British Foreign Secretary Jack Straw to complain personally to U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell at the United Nations. Powell responded by stating that the watch list was under review, adding, "I think we have that obligation to review these matters to see if we are right." Yusuf believed his inclusion on a watch list may have simply been an error, a mistaken identification of him for a man with the same name, but different spelling. On October 1, 2004 he requested the removal of his name. "I remain bewildered by the decision of the U.S. authorities to refuse me entry to the United States." According to a statement by Yusuf, the man on the list was named Yusuf Islam, indicating that Yusuf himself was not the suspected terrorism supporter. Romanization of Arabic names can easily result in different spellings. The transliteration of the Islamic name for Joseph, Yusuf's chosen name, lists a dozen spellings. 2 years later, in December 2006, Yusuf was admitted without incident into the United States for several radio concert performances and interviews to promote his new record. Yusuf said of the incident at the time, "No reason was ever given, but being asked to repeat the spelling of my name again and again, made me think it was a fairly simple mistake of identity. Rumors which circulated after made me imagine otherwise." Yusuf has written a song about the 2004 exclusion from the U.S., entitled Boots and Sand, recorded in the summer of 2008 and featuring Paul McCartney, Dolly Parton, and Terry Sylvester.
Libel cases. British reports regarding inadmissibility to the U.S.
In October 2004 the British newspapers The Sun and the Sunday Times voiced their support for Yusuf's exclusion from the U.S., claiming that he had supported terrorism. Yusuf successfully sued for libel and received a substantial out-of-court financial settlement and apologies from the newspapers stating that he had never supported terrorism and acknowledging that he had recently been given a Man of Peace Award from the private Nobel Peace Prize Laureates Committee. However, the Sunday Times managing editor Richard Caseby said that while there was an agreed settlement, they always denied liability, and disagreed with Cat Stevens' lawyer's interpretation, but took a pragmatic view of the lawsuit. Yusuf responded that he was delighted by the settlement helps vindicate my character and good name. It seems to be the easiest thing in the world these days to make scurrilous accusations against Muslims, and in my case it directly impacts on my relief work and damages my reputation as an artist. The harm done is often difficult to repair, and added that he intended to donate the financial award given to him by the court to help orphans of the tsunami in the Indian Ocean. Yusuf wrote about the experience in a newspaper article titled A Cat in a Wild World.
False rumor regarding unveiled women.
On July 18, 2008, Yusuf received substantial undisclosed damages from the World Entertainment News Network following their publication of a story that claimed the singer did not speak to unveiled women. The allegations first surfaced in German newspaper BZ. After Yusuf's trip to Berlin in March 2007 to collect the Echo Music Award for Life Achievements as musician and ambassador between cultures. Once again he was awarded damages after the World Entertainment News Network allowed an article to be published on cantatmusic.com, a website said to have 2.2 million page views a month, alleging that Yusuf would not speak to unveiled women with the exception of his wife. His solicitor was reported as having said that he was made out to be so sexist and bigoted that he refused at an awards ceremony to speak to or even acknowledge any women who were not wearing a veil. The offending news agency apologized, admitting that Yusuf has never had any problem in working with women and, contrary to the article in question, never has required a third party as an intermediary to function at work. The money from this lawsuit will go to Yusuf's small kindness charity. Yusuf himself discusses this topic on his website, saying, "It's true that I have asked my manager to respectfully request lady presenters refrain from embracing me when giving awards or during public appearances, but that has nothing to do with my feelings or respect for them. Islam simply requires me to honor the dignity of ladies or young girls who are not closely related to me, and avoid physical intimacy, however innocent it may be." He adds, "My 4 daughters all follow the basic wearing of clothes which modestly cover their God-given beauty. They're extremely well educated. They do not cover their faces and interact perfectly well with friends and society."
Return to music. 1990s 2006, as Yusuf Islam.
Yusuf gradually resumed his musical career in the 1990s. His initial recordings had not included any musical instruments other than percussion, and featured lyrics about Islamic themes, some in spoken word or hand form. He invested in building his own recording studio which he named Mountain of Light Studios in the late 1990s, and he was featured as a guest singer on God is the Light, a song on an album of nasheeds by the group Rihan. In addition, he invited and collaborated with other Muslim singers, including Canadian artist Dud Hansby. After Yusuf's friend, Irfan Ljubajankic, the foreign minister of Bosnia and Herzegovina, was killed by a Serbian rocket attack, Yusuf appeared at a 1997 benefit concert in Sarajevo and recorded a benefit album named after a song written by Ljubajankic, I Have No Cannons That Roar. Realizing there were few educational resources designed to teach children about the Islamic religion, Yusuf wrote and produced a children's album, A is for Allah, in 2000 with the assistance of South African singer-songwriter Zayn Baker. The title song was one Yusuf had written years before to introduce his first child to both the religion and the Arabic alphabet. He also established his own record label, Jamal Records, and Mountain of Light Productions, and he donates a percentage of his project's proceeds to his small kindness charity, whose name is taken from the Quran. On the occasion of the 2000 re-release of his Cat Stevens albums, he explained that he had stopped performing in English due to his misunderstanding of the Islamic faith. "This issue of music in Islam is not as cut and dried as I was led to believe. I relied on heresy, that was perhaps my mistake." Yusuf has reflected that his decision to leave the Western pop music business was perhaps too quick with too little communication for his fans. For most, it was a surprise, and even his guitarist, Alun Davis said in later interviews that he hadn't believed that Stevens would actually go through with it, after his many forays into other religions throughout their relationship. Yusuf himself has said the cut between his former life and his life as a Muslim might have been too quick, too severe, and that more people might have been better informed about Islam, and given an opportunity to better understand it, and himself, if he had simply removed those items that were considered haram, in his performances, allowing him to express himself musically and educate listeners through his music without violating any religious constraints. In 2003, after repeated encouragement from within the Muslim world, Yusuf once again recorded Peace Train for a compilation CD, which also included performances by David Bowie and Paul McCartney. He performed Wild World in Nelson Mandela's 46,664 concert with his former session player Peter Gabriel, the first time he had publicly performed in English in 25 years. In December 2004, he and Ronan Keating released a new version of Father and Son. The song entered the charts at number 2, behind Band-Aid 20's Do They Know It's Christmas? They also produced a video of the pair walking between photographs of fathers and sons, while singing the song. The proceeds of Father and Son were donated to the Band-Aid charity. Keating's former group, Boyzone, had a hit with the song a decade earlier. As he had been persuaded before, Yusuf contributed to the song, because the proceeds were marked for charity. On April 21, 2005, Yusuf gave a short talk before a scheduled musical performance in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, on the anniversary of Muhammad's birthday. He said, Yusuf observed that there are no real guidelines about instruments and no references about the business of music in the Quran, and that Muslim travelers first brought the guitar to Moorish Spain. He noted that Muhammad was fond of celebrations, as in the case of the birth of a child, or a traveler arriving after a long journey. Thus, Yusuf concluded that healthy entertainment was acceptable within limitations, and that he now felt that it was no sin to perform with the guitar. Music, he now felt, is uplifting to the soul. Something sorely needed in troubled times. At that point, he was joined by several young male singers who sang backing vocals and played a drum, with Yusuf as lead singer and guitarist. They performed 2 songs, both half in Arabic, and half in English. Talaya al-Badru al-Layna, an old song in Arabic which Yusuf recorded with a folk sound to it, and another song, The Wind East and West, which was newly written by Yusuf and featured a distinct R&B sound. With this performance, Yusuf began slowly to integrate instruments into both older material from his Cat Stevens era, some with slight lyrical changes, and new songs, both those known to the Muslim communities around the world and some that have the same Western flair from before, with a focus on new topics and another generation of listeners. In a 2005 press release, he explained his revived recording career. In early 2005, Yusuf released a new song entitled Indian Ocean about the 2004 tsunami disaster. The song featured Indian composer-producer A. R. Rahman, Aha keyboard player Man Faruman and Travis drummer Neil Primrose. Proceeds of the single went to help orphans in Banda Aceh, one of the areas worst affected by the tsunami, through Yusuf's Small Kindness charity. At first, the single was released only through several online music stores but later featured on the compilation album Cat Stevens, Gold. I had to learn my faith and look after my family, and I had to make priorities. But now I've done it all and there's a little space for me to fill in the universe of music again. On May 28, 2005, Yusuf delivered a keynote speech and performed at the Adopt a Minefield Gala in Dusseldorf. The Adopt a Minefield charity, under the patronage of Paul McCartney, works internationally to raise awareness and funds to clear landmines and rehabilitate landmine survivors. Yusuf attended as part of an honorary committee which also included George Martin, Richard Branson, Boutros Ghali, Klaus Fuhrmann, Christopher Lee and others. In mid-2005, Yusuf played guitar for the Dolly Parton album, Those Were the Days, on her version of his Where Do the Children Play? Parton had also covered Peace Train a few years earlier. Yusuf has credited his then 21-year-old son Muhammad Islam, also a musician and artist, for his return to secular music, when the son brought a guitar back into the house, which Yusuf began playing. Muhammad's professional name is Umairios and his debut album was released in February 2007. Umairios created the art on Yusuf's album Another Cup, something that Cat Stevens did for his own albums in the 1970s. In May 2006, in anticipation of his forthcoming new pop album, the BBC One programme Imagine aired a 49-minute documentary with Alan Yentob called Yusuf, the artist formerly known as Cat Stevens. This documentary film features rare audio and video clips from the late 1960s and 1970s, as well as an extensive interview with Yusuf, his brother David Gordon, several record executives, Bob Geldof, Dolly Parton, and others outlining his career as Cat Stevens, his conversion and emergence as Yusuf Islam, and his return to music in 2006. There are clips of him singing in the studio when he was recording Another Cup, as well as a few 2006 excerpts of him on guitar singing a few verses of Cat Stevens songs including The Wind, and On the Road to Find Out. In December 2006, Yusuf was one of the artists who performed at the Nobel Peace Prize concert in Oslo, Norway, in honor of the prize winners, Muhammad Yunus and Grameen Bank. He performed the songs Midday, Avoid City After Dark, Peace Train, and Heaven Where True Love Goes. He also gave a concert in New York City that month as a Jazz at Lincoln Center event, recorded and broadcast by KCRW-FM radio, along with an interview by Nick Harcourt. Accompanying him, as in the Cat Stevens days, was Alun Davis, on guitar and vocals.
2006 present, as Yusuf. 2006 to 2008, and other cup-in appearances.
In March 2006, Yusuf finished recording his first all-new pop album since 1978. The album, Another Cup, was released internationally in November 2006 on his own label, Ya Records, distributed by Polydor Records in the UK and internationally by Atlantic Records, the 40th anniversary of his first album, Matthew and Son. An accompanying single, called Heaven Where True Love Goes, was also released. The album was produced with Rick Knowles, who has worked with Dido and Rod Stewart. The performer is noted as Yusuf, with a cover label identifying him as the artist formerly known as Cat Stevens. The art on the album is credited to Marios. Yusuf wrote all of the songs except Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood, and recorded it in the United States and the United Kingdom. Yusuf actively promoted this album, appearing on radio, television and in print interviews. In November 2006, he told the BBC, "It's me, so it's going to sound like that of course. This is the real thing. When my son brought the guitar back into the house, that was the turning point. It opened a flood of new ideas and music which I think a lot of people would connect with." Originally, Yusuf began to return only to his acoustic guitar as he had in the past, but his son encouraged him to experiment, which resulted in the purchase of a Stevie Ray Vaughan Fender Stratocaster in 2007. Also in November 2006, Billboard magazine was curious as to why the artist is credited as just his first name, Yusuf, rather than Yusuf Islam. His response was, "Because Islam doesn't have to be sloganized. The second name is like the official tag, but you call a friend by their first name. It's more intimate, and to me that's the message of this record." As for why the album sleeve says the artist formerly known as Cat Stevens, he responded, "That's the tag with which most people are familiar. For recognition purposes I'm not averse to that. For a lot of people, it reminds them of something they want to hold on to. That name is part of my history and a lot of the things I dreamt about as Cat Stevens have come true as Yusuf Islam." Yusuf was asked by the Swiss periodical Das Magazine why the title of the album was Another Cup, rather than Another Cup. The answer was that his breakthrough album, Tea for the Tillerman in 1970, was decorated with Yusuf's painting of a peasant sitting down to a cup of steaming drink on a land. Yusuf commented that the two worlds then, and now, are very different. His new album shows a steaming cup alone on this cover. His answer was that this was actually another cup. Something different. A bridge between the East and West, which Yusuf explained was his own perceived role. He added that, through him, Westerners might get a glimpse of the East, and Easterners, some understanding of the West. The cup, too, is important. It's a meeting place, a thing meant to be shared. On CBS Sunday Morning in December 2006, he said, "The cup is there to be filled with whatever you want to fill it with. For those people looking for Cat Stevens, they'll probably find him in this record. If you want to find Islam, go a bit deeper, you'll find him." He has since described the album as being overproduced, and refers to Another Cup as being a necessary hurdle he had to overcome before he could release his new album, Road Singer. In April 2007, BBC One broadcast a concert given at the Porchester Hall by Yusuf as part of BBC Sessions, his first live performance in London in 28 years, the previous one being the UNICEF Year of the Child concert in 1979. He played several new songs along with some old ones like Father and Son, The Wind, Where Do the Children Play? Don't Be Shy, Wild World, and Peace Train. In July 2007, he performed at a concert in Bochum, Germany, in benefit of Archbishop Desmond Tutu's Peace Center in South Africa and the Milagro Foundation of Deborah and Carlos Santana. The audience included Nobel laureates Mikhail Gorbachev, Desmond Tutu and other prominent global figures. He later appeared as the final act in the German leg of Live Earth in Hamburg, performing some classic Cat Stevens songs and more recent compositions reflecting his concern for peace and child welfare. His set included Stevie Wonder's Saturn, Peace Train, Where Do the Children Play?, Ruins, and Wild World. He performed at the Peace One Day concert at the Royal Albert Hall on September 21, 2007. In 2008, Yusuf contributed the song Edge of Existence to the charity album Songs for Survival, in support of the indigenous rights organization Survival International.
2008-present, road singer and tours.
In January 2009, Yusuf released a single in aid of children in Gaza, a rendition of the George Harrison song, The Day the World Gets Round, along with the German bassist Klaus Wumann, who had formerly collaborated with the Beatles. To promote the new single, Wumann redesigned his famous Beatles Revolver album cover, drawing a picture of a young Cat Stevens along with himself and Harrison. Proceeds from the single were donated to charities and organizations including UNESCO, UNRWA, and the non-profit group Save the Children, with the funds earmarked for Gaza children. Israeli consul David Saranga criticized Yusuf for not dedicating the song to all of the children who were victims of the conflict, including Israeli children. On May 5, 2009, Yusuf released Road Singer, a new pop album recorded in 2008. The lead track, Thinking About You, received its debut radio play on a BBC programme on March 23, 2009. Unlike Another Cup, Yusuf promoted the new album with appearances on American television as well as in the UK. He appeared on the Chris Isaak Hour on the A&E network in April 2009, performing live versions of his new songs, World O' Darkness, Boots and Sand, and Road Singer. On May 13 he appeared on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno in Los Angeles, and on May 14, on The Colbert Report in New York City, performing the title song from the Road Singer album. On May 15, he appeared on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, performing Boots and Sand, and Further and Son. On May 24 he appeared on the BBC's The Andrew Marr Show, where he was interviewed and performed the title track of Road Singer. On August 15, he was one of many guests at Fairport Convention's annual Fairport Scrippredy Convention, where he performed 5 songs accompanied by Alun Davis, with Fairport Convention as his backing band. A world tour was announced on his website to promote the new album. He was scheduled to perform at an invitation-only concert at New York City's Highline Ballroom on May 3 and to go on to Los Angeles, Chicago and Toronto, as well as some to-be-announced European venues. However, the New York appearance was postponed due to issues regarding his work visa. He appeared in May 2009 at Island Records' 50th anniversary concert in London. In November and December 2009 Yusuf undertook his Guess I'll Take My Time tour, which also showcased his musical play Moon Shadow. The tour took him to Dublin, where he had a mixed reception. Subsequently he was well received in Birmingham and Liverpool, culminating in an emotional performance at the Royal Albert Hall in London. In June 2010 he toured Australia for the first time in 36 years, and New Zealand for the first time ever. On October 30, 2010 Yusuf appeared at Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert's spoof Rally to Restore Sanity and Or Fear in Washington, D.C., singing alongside Ozzy Osbourne. Yusuf performed Peace Train, and Ozzy performed Crazy Train at the same time, followed by the OA's performance of Love Train. On March 2, 2011, Yusuf released his latest song, My People, as a free download available through his official website, as well as numerous other online outlets. Said to have been recorded at a studio located within 100 yards of the side of the Berlin Wall, the song is inspired by a series of popular uprisings in the Arab world, known as the Arab Spring. On April 1, 2011, Yusuf launched a new tour website, yusufinconcert.com, to commemorate his first European tour in over 36 years, scheduled from May 7 to June 2, 2011. The 10-day tour visited Germany, France, the Netherlands, Austria, Belgium and cities such as Stockholm, Hamburg, Oberhausen, Berlin, Munich, Rotterdam, Paris, Mannheim, Vienna and Brussels. In May 2012, Moon Shadow, a new musical by Yusuf, featuring music from throughout his career, opened at the Princess Theatre in Melbourne, Australia. The show received mixed reviews and closed 4 weeks early. In October 2013, Yusuf was nominated for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for his work under the Cat Stevens name. This was his second nomination, the first unsuccessful nomination being in 2005. He was selected and was inducted by Art Garfunkel in April 2014 at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, New York, where he performed Father and Son, Wild World, and Peace Train.
Awards. Humanitarian Awards.
2003, World Award, also known as the World Social Award for humanitarian relief work helping children and victims of war. 2004, Man for Peace Award presented by Mikhail Gorbachev for his dedication to promote peace, the reconciliation of people and to condemn terrorism. The ceremony was held in Rome, Italy, and attended by 5 Nobel Peace Prize laureates. 2005, Honorary Doctorate by the University of Gloucestershire for services to education and humanitarian relief. 2007, the Mediterranean Prize for Peace in Naples, Italy. The award was received as a result of the work he has done to increase peace in the world. 2007, Honorary Doctorate, LLD, by the University of Exeter, in recognition of his humanitarian work and improving understanding between Islamic and Western cultures. 2009, Special Achievement Award of the German Sustainability Award.
Music Awards and Recognition.
2014, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. 2008, Songwriters Hall of Fame nominee, unsuccessful. 2007, Echo Special Award for Life Achievements as a Musician and Ambassador Between Cultures. 2006, ASCAP Songwriter of the Year for The First Cut Is the Deepest, second time. 2006, ranked 49th in Paste's 100 Best Living Songwriters. 2005, ASCAP Songwriter of the Year and Song of the Year for The First Cut Is the Deepest.
Selected discography.
1967, Matthew and Son. 1967, New Masters. 1970, Mona Bone Jakin. 1970, Tea for the Tillerman, No. 8. 1971, Teaser and the Fira Cat, No. 2. 1972, Catch Bullet 4, No. 1. 1973, Foreigner, No. 3. 1974, Buddha and the Chocolate Box, No. 2. 1975, Numbers. 1977, Isetso, No. 7. 1978, Back to Earth. 2006, Another Cup. 2009,